Welcome to Remix EQ Live, where we're amplifying equity with a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and today I am broadcasting live from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. For those joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice in the comments. Let us know where you are joining from and the equity driven work you do or aspire to do. And remember, Remix EQ Live is an experience that's meant to be shared. So I encourage you to hit the share and invite buttons and bring along your people, your network, your family, your friends, your peeps to join our Remix EQ community today. This season, we are broadcasting live on LinkedIn and YouTube. We can now connect more broadly, growing our reach and continuing to build our learning community. And while those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers us the opportunity to connect and build community with each other around the equity-driven work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests and viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative and effective ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, work, and play. Throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to also share what you do to make the world a more just place. Today is season 4 premiere of Remix EQ Live. It's amazing to witness and experience an idea turn into reality. And it's real, y'all. This is the 25th show, and we've had 24 amazing guests who have spoken truth to power about injustices they experience and fight against. Guests have shared their lived experiences and career pathways with us and offered us a viewership of 4,700 plus, the opportunity to listen and learn from them about the perspectives, practices, and tools they utilize to achieve more equitable outcomes in the communities they serve. And at the end of today's show, I will announce our season 4 lineup of Remix EQ Live guests. Before we jump into today's community reflection show, I wanted to share with you that after season 3 wrapped up, I had the honor of giving a TEDx talk entitled Building Community to Make the World a More Just Place. My talk was inspired by the Remix EQ Live show and community. It offered me the opportunity to pause and reflect on the learning and inspiration I have been receiving from interviewing guests and interacting with you, our viewers, our social justice warriors. You'll have to watch the video to learn more about that sassy stance. In all seriousness, I do encourage you to view my TEDx talk video. The URL is on the screen and will show up in the comments. I would love for you to watch, react, leave comments, and engage in dialogue with each other. And of course, share it with your personal and professional communities. Earlier, I mentioned that Remix EQ Live went from idea to reality. And in the language of TED, Remix EQ Live is an idea, and for us, a community of ideas worth spreading. Hello, Brianna Matchett. Welcome. So excited for season 4. That makes all of us. Thanks for joining. Today's show, our 25th episode, is a community reflection show. This format differs from our interview shows in that I'm not interviewing anybody. Instead, I show up without guests, but in community with you to hold space for us to reflect together. As social justice warriors, we understand that reflection is necessary for us to do this work effectively, but also to sustain ourselves as we do it. With regard to the format, our community reflection shows are a bit shorter than our interview shows. They include an overview of the topic, which today is invitation, and a few prompts or questions that encourage you to reflect on your approach or practices within your communities. Along the way, I share or remix examples from my work or the show or you when you share in the comments. You are encouraged to consider these prompts and examples more in depth during your personal journaling time or with your small circle of support, be it professional or personal. So let's begin. For those of you who've been connected with me for a while, you know I have a bit of a penchant for acronyms. Remember the season 2 opener, Rally, where I shared how Remix EQ is a space where we recognize, appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. And I can't think of a better way to launch season 4 of Remix EQ Live than with an invite to consider how we create space for equitable participation in and contribution to our work, our service, and our communities that make the world a more just place. We can inquire about people's ideas, experiences, questions, critiques, needs, and desires by asking them about what they know or want to learn, their experiences, past, present, and hoped for, and their expectations for change or what they wish to remain the same. We can notice when a person or community requires more or different opportunities to add their voice to conversations for change. Hold space for them to share how they want to be seen, heard, and felt. We can value the learning, depth of understanding, and empathy that comes from listening to others with different lived experiences, perspectives, and ways of knowing and doing. And appreciate when you find common ground, connect across communities, and reach consensus. And respect when you don't. Much history and hurt has created the conditions we are working to counter and change. We can initiate by designing participation structures and tools that encourage people to talk with each other, listen to each other, and express themselves with confidence and comfort. And we can turn inward to reflect on the beliefs and practices that may unintentionally silence, mute, or ignore the contributions of people and communities. Asking ourselves, have I made you uncomfortable with my words, actions, or omissions? Have I ignored your comment because I didn't understand or agree with it? Have I changed the content or meaning of your statement with my attempts to clarify or paraphrase? And have I amplified some and not all contributions with finger snaps, repetition, or co signing? And we can embody a spirit of sincerity and openness when we extend an invitation to speak, and gratitude when our invitation is accepted. It is an honor to position oneself as a listener and learner and be in conversation with those from whom we have much to learn. Of course, I invite you to share how you create opportunities to listen and learn from the people and places you serve. And please add your contributions to the show in the comments. Hello, Brandy Tolbert. Woo! It's great to see you here on the show. I hope you're doing well. Welcome, welcome. And everybody who's tuning in, the invitation is extended. It's a standing invitation throughout the show. So, as you know, there are many ways to invite people and communities to share. Community forums, surveys, polls, planning meetings. And I engage in all of these methodologies and practices, and am always open to new and different ways to create space for people to share what matters most to them. And I don't know if this is a confession or me stating the obvious, but I love interviews. It is one of my favorite methodologies to employ in research, evaluation, and community advocacy. To interview community stakeholders in varied roles and walks of life just brings me such joy, which is probably why I host an interview show. And of course, I am drawn to this methodology because I love conversation, but I am also someone who appreciates the guidance of a protocol or script. I believe that each thoughtful, planned interview question, when asked, is an invitation for a person to not only speak their truth and share their experiences, but also to elaborate and exemplify them. I remember about 20 years ago when I started working at UC Berkeley as an advisor to electrical engineering and computer science students, EECS, as it was referred to. I had the opportunity to take a women in science course out of interest in the topic and to explore whether or not I wanted to pursue graduate school. After the course ended, I continued to work on my project where I interviewed women of color engineering students about their experiences and identities. I submitted my paper to an academic journal for review and received lots of overwhelming feedback, which my advisor helped me to sort out and address. One reviewer's comment has always stuck with me. They asked, how did this interviewer get so much information out of these women? And it wasn't a compliment. It was a critique about whether my interview protocol could be used by someone else, and the findings repeated. Repeatable methods and findings that can be generalized are definitely valued in many research communities. And when it comes to under-researched and underserved communities, we need to challenge whether this value is a priority or if it's more important to engage in consistent practices that create the conditions for us to listen and learn from those who have yet to be heard. When I reflected on this comment, I learned why I was able to get so much information out of these women. One, I invited these women to tell their stories. And in my invitation, I communicated that their story mattered to me, their story mattered to other women of color engineering students, and their story mattered to those who were seeking to support them. I also shared an identity and some common experiences with these women. I was once a Black women engineering student who saw very few other women of color students, and I brought to our conversation a set of questions informed by research and my experiences, some of which were similar. I also brought a shared understanding that allowed me to relate to and follow up to some of their responses, as well as a recognition of their uniqueness and expectations for differences in in our experiences, because shared identities do not equate to the same experiences. And to clarify, you can definitely interview people who are different from you in terms of identity or experiences. It's important that in your invitation, you seek to find common ground and connection, especially in your why or purpose for interviewing. How will their story add to or counter the existing narratives you wish to understand or amplify? And what change are you seeking by asking their input? The third reason I was able to get so much information out of these women is that I met them where they were, literally, or more appropriately, geographically. I drove all around the San Francisco Bay Area, which is really large, and met them after their courses, on the weekend, when they were finished with their jobs. I made myself available to listen to them when they were ready to share their experiences. And these efforts, prioritizing their convenience, identifying points of connection, making visible a shared purpose, created the readiness and willingness for them to accept my invitations to speak. Invitations to speak, even in interviews, are not simply an ask. They are a set of acts or practices that create the space, the conditions, and the comfort to speak, listen, and learn. Remix EQ Live is a learning community where we share approaches and practices for how we make the world a more just place. So I invite you to share in the comments your practices that create the conditions for us to listen and learn from those who have yet to be heard, or who can add to or counter the existing narratives about their lives, communities, circumstances, and experiences. Hello! Our viewer says, "Hi, Erica. I appreciate the thought that shared identities do not equate this to the same experiences." Yes, and thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, it's very important to think about how much we do have shared, but within that, like richness of identity is a richness of experience. And sometimes it's just as important to note how we're the same, but to note kind of the nuances or not so nuanced differences that we have that make our connections, that make our communities, and then make our work more rich. So thank you for that. Yes, I appreciate it. So, guys, I continue to invite you to share. For those who are just joining us, this is Remix EQ Live. We're amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. So thank you for sharing and inviting others to tune in. And of course, I'm going to continue to encourage you to interact with me and each other. So post comments, ask questions as we continue our community reflections about extending the invitation to people and communities to participate and contribute to change. You are part of this Remix EQ Live experience. You are part of our community. So far, I invited you to consider how to create space for others to speak and listen by engaging in actions such as inquiring, noticing, valuing, initiating, turning inward, and embodying. I also added to our conversation today an example of how I began using interviews as a method for inviting people to speak, and my first steps in creating the conditions for myself and others to listen and learn from those we have yet to hear from. As I shared at the top of this 25th episode of Remix EQ Live, I will also offer us a set of prompts to consider in our equity-driven work and practice, be it research, evaluation, community organizing, facilitation, advocacy, and others. Our first prompt: what opportunities do you have or can have to create what opportunities do you have or can you create to listen to the people you serve? As always, I invite you to add insights and examples in the comments to share with our Remix EQ community. I'd like to remix one more example from my collaborations that illustrates how interviews can be invitations and a practice for listening. Last year, I worked with researchers Drs. Jessa Dickinson and Sheena Arete when they were at DePaul University in Chicago. I served as an external evaluator where my role was to interview a set of community partners that comprised their academic community partnerships. Over the years, Dr. Sheena Arete's research group, which included Dr. Dickinson, had engaged different community organizations in participatory practices as co-planners for local initiatives, co-designers of technology, and co-data analysts. So I share with you an example, which is only really a taste of all the amazing work that they did through these partnerships. But one example is that they recruited street outreach workers in the design of an app that helped them to alert other street outreach workers to rumors or the start of violence so they can either prevent it or quicken their response. The street outreach workers and the organizational staff were co-designers of this technology with the research group. They had a vested interest in that the resulting technology had the potential to make their communities safer. As Dickinson and Arete reflected on the academic community partnerships they have established, they realized their relationships with community organizations and members were complex and powered, which can create the conditions for inequity. As part of my work, I offered feedback on Dickinson's interview protocol and conducted the interviews as a third party who was not involved in the partnership or the work. In the interviews, community partners were invited to reflect on their goals, interactions, and outcomes with the research group, creating space for them to discuss the role of race or other power dynamics in the relationships. Community partners were also encouraged to offer examples of how they shared or contributed resources, which included their time, individual or organizational. It also included them brokering relationships for the university using their relationships, their reputation, and their community knowledge, all of which are of value. And honestly, when we think about it, are invaluable to the community change that these partners envision. This example highlights the importance of listening to the people and places you serve, especially if you are positioning yourself as a partner. It also underscores the importance of reflection and intentionality when designing your listening methodology, which includes people such as researchers and evaluators, practice such as how you design the interview, and the tools such as the interview protocol that guide your work. So please, I continue to invite you to share in the comments or in your journal your listening methodologies that you do with the communities that you serve. How do you create the conditions for your people and partners to speak about your shared or different goals, desired or realized outcomes, and of course, challenges and contributions? So now our second prompt, and you guessed it, we just reflected on the listen part of listen and learn, and now we'll reflect on the learn. Okay. So how do you utilize or share what you've learned with the people and places you serve? As always, add your insights and examples in the comments and share with our Remix EQ community. It takes courage to speak your truth. It also takes courage to create change because you listened. In the example I just shared about academic community partnerships, Dr. Jessa Dickinson synthesized what she learned from reflecting on her work with community partners and analyzing responses to the community interviews. She created a reflexive framework for academic partners to apply when working with community partners, prompting them to consider the power they wield as institutions entrenched in racist and capitalist systems, and to recognize and value the contributions of time, relationships, and knowledge that community partners bring to the agreed upon collaboration and pursuit of change. In my business, Blue Knowledge, and our inclusive evaluation services, we have the opportunity to support mission driven organizations to invite or create the conditions for people, for the people they serve, to speak about circumstances and change. And we have had the opportunity to witness how their listening has informed campaign messaging for public health insurance, instructional priorities within schools, refinement to music programmings, be it improvement or institutionalizing activities that were piloted and proved fruitful, and also recommendations for healthful policies that could lead to food justice. The possibility for change is great when we invite people and communities to speak and we follow up with a commitment to listen and learn from them about how to make the world a more just place. So please share the outcomes of your listening and learning practices with us in the comments. We're eager to listen and learn from you. I'm just checking out the comments. Thank you guys for sharing. Great. Well, I want to bring up, thank you, LinkedIn user. It doesn't say your name, but I appreciate the comment of like adding to the conversation what it is that you want to learn. So I want to know more about how educators are working to create more spaces to strengthen educational opportunities for students of color. And I think that's a great question to raise. And it also, I think the next question is, how can we create these opportunities to listen to educators, to listen to students about what it is that they want and need to support of these educational opportunities that we hope are fruitful and relevant and related to their day-to-day and future lives that they haven't even explored. So thank you for sharing and adding that to the conversation. As we close out today's community reflection show and open up the 4th season of Remix EQ Live, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live is a learning community, and our interview shows are invitations for professionals who center equity in their work to speak about and share with us how they work to make the world a more just place. They are also invitations for you, my social justice warriors, to listen and learn from them and participate and contribute to our collective reflections, practice, and change. So I invite you to tune in every second and fourth Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn and YouTube. See, look at me getting out in these digital streets. And as always, and as I believe should be expected by now, the season 4 lineup is fire. This season, I have invited Dr. Chantel Perry, commonly known as Dr. C, to speak about her experiences in the data science field and how she is working to upskill and support professionals as they twist and turn in their career pathways. You are invited to celebrate Black Breastfeeding Week with Dr. Nandy Marshall, who's speaking to us from a public health perspective, and Dr. Kathy Anderson, who was one of our first Remix EQ Live guests, and she'll be back to speak with us from an integrated pediatric medicine lens. You are also invited to celebrate the joy and magic of books with Joy Etriche, who curates children's books by authors and illustrators of color, and Leslie Ann Murray, who reviews diverse books and interviews diverse writers. I have invited Marcia Guerriere to speak with us about supporting and celebrating women of color in entrepreneurship and leadership. And as you know, I love adding new critical perspectives to the Remix EQ Live repertoire. I invite you to listen and learn along with me from Dr. Sarah L. Webb as she speaks about colorism, raising awareness, shifting attitudes, and taking action. As you know by now, you have a standing invitation to tune in to Remix EQ Live every second and fourth Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn and YouTube, and to participate and contribute and add your ideas and experience to our community. So watch your feed, check your inbox, and visit the Remix EQ Live webpage for episode announcements, recordings, and more information about our inspiring guests and upcoming events. You can also watch, react, comment, and share my recent TEDx talk entitled Building Community to Make the World a More Just Place, which is inspired by the Remix EQ Live experience. And also discover new ways to support the Remix EQ community via donation or purchasing merch to maybe journal down some of those ideas in response to our prompts. And while you're on the show's webpage, please poke around the website and learn more about my business, Blue Knowledge, and our growing family of brands and services, which advance equity in schools and communities through collaborative research, inclusive evaluation, and equity-driven professional learning. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Blue Knowledge YouTube channel, where you can have updates on Remix EQ Live. And of course, I invite you to connect with me on this platform or any other platforms in which we meet. So thank you, Remix EQ community, for your engagement, your encouragement, your rally, which is how we recognize, appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and this is Remix EQ Live. See you next time.